at debate. We're wondering if it's mission impossible for that Arab League observer mission that's in Syria right now. We're talking about it with Syrian activist Majed Aid. Thank you for being back with us. As well with us from the Kuwait Times, Fouad Al-Obaid. From Beirut, he's the former military governor of the Lebanese capital. General Hisham Jaber now heads the Middle East Center for Studies and Public Affairs. Anna Nestad of Human Rights Watch is with us, and Laurie Dundon of the Partnership for a Secure America. Before the break, we were headlining just some of those obstacles of what's going to come out. And Laurie Dundon, I just want to pick up before we move on, just very briefly here. We've just been told of all of the obstacles of putting together a report. You have to go for your information in a furtive manner. We know the observer mission is getting the full guided tour from official authorities. What's going to be the outcome then? What can come out of that report?
There are dozens of ways to stonewall a mission. So the report and the importance of the report is to see how you can use it to mobilize even further action, in addition to the individual incidents that they'll be reporting on. So now, after the Arab League puts a report together, how can that information be disseminated and potentially used to mobilize a new diplomatic initiative? How can other countries be brought on board so that it's harder and harder to refuse the facts on the ground? And how can you try to look at what you can affect by drawing more and more affirmation together?
Fouad, about the Arab Parliament, which is an advisory body to the Arab League, its chairman has said, let's just pull the mission.
Well, I think tonight we've talked a lot about reports and about reporting on what's really going on, but I think one thing is clear. When you have 5,000 citizens being killed, I don't think you can call it an insurgency, especially when they're unarmed and they're being killed by tanks and shellings and different military operations that are essentially equipped to deal with foreign military intervention and are used today to kill their own civilians. And tragically with Syria, it's not something new. I mean, it has happened in the past, and so it's almost a government policy of dealing almost ruthlessly with the demonstration to crush them down as a state kind of policy. The question today that's not being heard and should be heard is what next? I mean, what can be done, what should be done, and
that was my next question.
And what possibly could be done. I mean, okay, we're talking about reports. Yes, 10,000 people have been captured, more have been tortured. That's nothing surprising. I mean, coming from a region that essentially has dealt and has lived in such a manner for the best half of last century, if not more. The question today is, what are the regional outcomes? I mean, one thing is clear. All the Arab countries, for the most part, don't have a lot of democratic credentials themselves. A lot of them don't have legitimacy to intervene in Syria when different atrocities are happening in their own country. The global international community has been marred with the Libyan escapade. They've been bogged down, with the states in Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not sure that the European and US populations in these electoral times are ready to see another conflict. Also, if conflict does arise, then what are the likely outcomes? I think, and I fear, and I think the rational people in the region really understand that nothing good can happen right now out of
But is the Arab League the only game in town?
Well, the Arab League, in essence, is a kind of caucus of Arab leaders. But if we look at this year, 4 heads of states of the Arab League have been taken out one way, shape, or form. The institution has no real credibility in the eyes of the West, at least, and I don't think it has the credibility in the eyes of the Arabs to do much.
Laurie Dundon, in Washington, there's division over the Arab League and its mission. Foreign Policy quotes one Obama administration official saying the Arab League is really showing initiative for the first time in a long time. Another one saying the Arab League monitoring mission is all, quote, kabuki theater.
Well, the second quote happened to come from someone who's not working on Syria issues in the State Department, so perhaps less involved in the center of decision making. But I think there is an interesting theme coming out of Washington, which is what other actors in the region are taking the lead, can take the lead, and it's maybe not always the best for the U.S. to be the first one out, stepping and leading these types of missions. But Washington is certainly concerned with what's going on, and I think they're struggling right now in internal debates over what options do we have, all of the difficulties that you just described. There's absolutely intervention exhaustion across the United States. You're exactly right. Unfortunately, the American population is not ready for another intervention. So I think they're now even looking at what else they can explore for assistance directly to the opposition. But that's the new controversial topic being quietly discussed in Washington.
Which I guess, Hisham Jaber, brings us back to the Arab League. Is it up to the Arab League to be taking initiatives?
Yes, I think you called the mission of the Arab League observers that mission impossible. I think it's not impossible, but it's dangerous and critical. And if they don't trust the group who came already to Syria, we are expecting in the next few days other groups will come from the Gulf countries. And I think it's easy. I'm not in a position to give them an advice, but we are familiar in Lebanon and we had experience with such conflicts. We start to hear about snipers. It's very dangerous. And we have experience in Lebanon that snipers, most of them, they used to belong to a third party. Now, the Arab League, let me give you an example. If one of those observers, or two or three, for example, will be killed by a sniper, and we need to make investigation to know where this sniper come from the protesters, from the government, from the regime, from the army, from the, we call them shabiha or something like this. It's very difficult and very critical. I think the Arab League must call for a ceasefire very straight away, and to ask the army to stop the fire and to see if the insurgents will continue their military operation, to release all arrested people and to visit, for example, the hospitals, etc. It's not that impossible, in my opinion.
Not that impossible.
Difficult, but we can do it.
All right, Fouad Alouad.
It's a question of credibility. No opposition force is going to kill the observers that are there to protect them. So that at least is clear in the eyes of most people. Second of all, if I may, I mean, what's the point of the observer mission? Most of the foreign ministers in all countries in the world that have ambassadors in Syria or any other country will have clear access to what's really going on.
Majid Aid.
Well, I have 2 or 3 points just to mention. To Mr. Hisham Jaber, I will tell him that yes, the snipers are from third party, which is Iran and Hezbollah. They are coming from there to support the Syrian regime and kill our Syrian people. This is I think it summarizes all these insurgents, and I don't know what he's talking about.
Wait, hold on. Anna Estate, has there been outsourcing of the killing, as it were?
We've heard lots of allegations, nothing confirmed.
Okay.
Yeah, for the Syrian people, what they really want now. The Syrian people has made like 3 Fridays. They called it the Friday of the buffer zone, the Friday of the no-fly zone, and the Friday of the civilian protection. These 3 demands are essential now for Syria to protect the Syrian people. And the Syrian people, they don't trust now what the Arab League is doing. Yes, there are people with good intentions in this committee now, but they don't trust it. Their boss is a war criminal from Darfur. How can a war criminal from Darfur observe another criminal in Syria? This is a very important point to discuss. The Syrian people, they demand now on the TV, everywhere, on YouTube, to move the Syrian file to the Security Council. We don't want just the United States or France to, we want the Security Council to interfere in Syria, to protect the civilians, to make a buffer zone so that they help the Syrian army to leave. We know now from many generals, they are ready to leave the Syrian army and leave Bashar Assad just to join the people, but they want protection.
Let's pick up on that point. General Al-Dabi, he's the former head of security for Sudan's president. Is he a war criminal?
He has very questionable record. I know that there are allegations that he is a war criminal, that he committed very serious crimes as the head of intelligence, but...
Why was he picked?
It's a very good question. I really don't think at this point, I know it's very tempting to focus on his figure in particular, but I really think it's about the mission as a whole. And as we could see, some of the observers, which I think is very important, are trying to voice their own concerns. And, when we see more of a difference in opinion, that will give us a very clear sense of what's going on. But if I may pick up on the point about what's next, that was one of your previous questions, because I think that's the key. In terms of, I do think that the situation needs to be referred to the Security Council, and the Security Council needs to refer to the International Criminal Court. It's not, part of the question is stopping the killings. Another question is accountability. Several thousand people have been killed, tortured, executed. Crimes against humanity have been committed. It's not just Human Rights Watch's conclusion, it's the conclusion of the Office of the High Commissioner's mission for human rights. So this needs to be investigated. The only body that can reasonably investigate it is the International Criminal Court. And that's where the Arab League's observer mission comes into play. It's really important for the Arab League to be part of this plan. It's not going to happen most likely without their endorsement. And that's why it's important that the observers come up with a credible report and the mission acts on it.
Right, yeah, come up with a credible report and offers up an endorsement of something that's solid that can be sent to the Security Council. Fouad Al-Obaid, only problem with that is that's exactly what happened with Libya. There was the endorsement of the Arab League. There was no observer mission before it, though. Did they burn their bridges? Is that a one-off, what happened with Libya?
In what terms, if I may ask?
In terms of, will the Arab League be able to find a consensus? We can perhaps call up, if you want, a map of the region. It could be a fickle thing, consensus, when it comes to Syria. We know that there are countries such as Lebanon, such as Algeria, such as, if we see the map of the region there, such as Iraq, where they're perhaps going to want to, they perhaps are going to balk at supporting anything that leads to outside intervention against Syria, not to mention nations like Jordan that might just want to stay under the radar on this one.
What's going on right now in Syria and what's going on in the Arab League, it's a welcome development, if I may say. As an Arab, I think that there's something going on in the Arab League, at least an image, at least an attempt to create an image of action. That's, I think, in itself a positive image. The reality on the ground is this, that all of the Arab countries, in one way, shape, or form, are themselves bogged down with their own difficulties and their own problems. And I think there is no country, even if we take into regard, for example, Turkey and their clear threats towards Syria, no real action can be taken with a country such as Syria for many reasons. Most of them are geopolitics, others are because of interests, others are because of alliances. That would make any intervention in Syria, one, costly, two, useless in helping, the civilians. More civilians will die, so in that sense, it will not save people. And the third option would be, as we have seen in many of the Arab uprisings, the best solution or the most likely solution would be to have dissent within the armed forces and to have it, internally figured out by the opposition, perhaps to have some support from the outside, like in Libya. But most countries will not, I think, be ready to accept any change officially unless they've seen that, the opposition has taken over or is in control, as has been the case in Syria. And I think most countries are in a wait-and-see position, trying to do something, testing the waters on what can be achieved. A lot of them are realistic about the matter. Even the mission, perhaps, the choosing of the head of mission was deliberate. In the sense that you don't really want it to succeed, you don't want it to fail. You want to have a perception of action that is credible enough for their people, that's credible enough in front of the international community, but at the same time, they know what's going on the ground.
Hisham Jaber, is it possible that the Arab League approach has left enough wiggle room so that you can have a face-saving deal for all sides, or is this just a prelude to trying to endorse a no-fly zone in front of the Security Council?
No. First of all, I have to say that the Arab League let them do their job, and they have 1 month can be renewed. Second, with all my respect, let me tell you, I pretend to be expert in this issue more than people who live outside. We are very close to Syria, and we know. And I am not, with all my respect to the wishes and to the feeling of your guests, I try always to be
I was in Syria only a few years ago. I left Syria only last year, sir. I was in Lebanon as well.
Please, let him finish.
Wait for a buffer zone. I think even Turkey now will not work for a buffer zone between Syria and Turkey because it's very difficult and it's very dangerous. And second, you are talking about an army in Syria. This army, of course, there is a solution. Maybe if you go back tomorrow to the Security Council, you are going to face the veto of China and Russia. Russia came with initiative. In my opinion, maybe it will be a little bit similar to the solution in Yemen. But with the difference between Syria and Yemen, believe me, if you make a statistic now and you ask the people in Syria what they prefer, you have 55% at least they want the security would reform, and even this regime would reform instead of unknown coming regime. They don't know if they are fundamentalist or if they are extremist or something like this. of course, there is an hemorrhage in Syria. The situation is very critical, but I would not advise them to count of any military intervention from outside. And you are talking about the neighbor countries. You have Lebanon, which is have good relation with the regime in Syria. Also the Iraq, and also, like your guest said, Jordan prefer to be a neutral in this conflict for its common interest between Syria and Jordan.
All right, so it's going to be a lot more tricky. Just Hisham Jaber.
Position negative against the regime. Turkey now is trying to slow down.
All right,
the briefing about the situation right now.
All right, Laurie Dundon. By the way, it is true that we've heard a lot less from Prime Minister Erdogan in Turkey the last couple of weeks.
This is a tricky situation if they go forward towards a no-fly zone. I think right now there are a number of states who are thinking practically and saying, well, let's watch what comes out of this observer mission step first before we have to start to address the next step. Unfortunately, there are just some real military complications of something like a no-fly zone, having to go in and hit the air defense sites, the military command and control sites. So it's going to be a big step for countries to take to agree to take that huge leap and try for a humanitarian corridor or no-fly zone.
Within days for Libya.
And unfortunately, I think the geopolitics, it's a broad word, but the geopolitics of Syria just aren't the same as Libya, and it's going to be complicated. It's a situation on the ground is different. The entire formula is different. So even if the Arab League report does come together, does recommend to the Security Council, I think you'll have a number of states, not only China and Russia, that are going to be hesitant. And on top of that, you do have the Libya aftermath, which Russia uses all the time.
One final point on all this. When it comes to the Arab League, it's sort of like the EU. There's the seat of the movement that's permanently in Cairo, and there's the rotating presidency. Right now, that's held by Qatar until the month of March. Do you see policy at the Arab League changing when there's the handover to Iraq?
It is very likely and quite worrisome indeed. But I do think, a lot depends on this mission. I think, including the integrity of the Arab League itself, and I think we shouldn't forget that. It's not just about what's going on in Syria, it's about how this initiative, a very new initiative for the Arab League, will be seen. And I do hope that before the presidency change, we'll see some action on Syria, which does not have to be a no-fly zone, which does not have to be a military intervention. There are other ways to protect civilians from the crackdown by their own government.
All right, and we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you, though, very much for joining us, Anna Nestad. I want to thank Majed Aid, Fouad Al-Obaid, Laurie Dundon, and from Beirut, General Hisham Jaber of the Middle East Center for Studies and Public Affairs. And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.